Hey, welcome back, horror fans, cinephiles, and Giallo enthusiasts. This is Tanner Leeser, the King in Giallo, and this is episode 3 of the Giallo adjacent podcast. Once again, joined by my good friend Nathan.
Hey.
And we are continuing to talk about the 1980 William Friedkin film Cruising. This should be it, though. We should be wrapping it up. Unfortunately, we weren't able to get this done sooner, but now is better than never. So anyways, where should we pick up from?
Well, just for the record, we weren't able to get it done sooner, but it is not, we were not like missing because we were out murdering other people or anything like that. I want to make that clear.
I mean, speak for yourself.
I just want to at least plant doubt in the audience's mind. Right. So,
okay. You do that.
They won't believe me.
I like to keep it open and ambiguous, like Friedkin.
You got me on that one. See, I was playing weirdo chess, and you absolutely beat me at that. It was checkmate. Anyway, okay. Yes, go on. Sorry.
One thing I will say, and I hope this isn't too distracting, but we do both have our fans recording, so you might get some white noise in the background. But yeah, you couldn't get us to do this in our own domiciles without having some sort of fan or air conditioning on.
If anybody listens to this like a year or two from now or whatever, there was a record heat wave going on right now. So, yeah, no thanks.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I believe it is a record. It's something to the effect of like, I know that like, and maybe this happens all the time, but I know that people in other countries are actually dying. Sorry, I don't mean to laugh. It's so bad that people are dying, like thousands of them apparently. So
anyway, let's talk about people dying in New York City in Cruising. That's probably a little on a better note.
A little more relevant and on a better note. Fake deaths, not real murders. So, where do you want to start?
Well, we don't have to start from here, but I will say in the time since we've done the episode 1 and this episode 3, I had the liberty of rereading Cruising by Gerald Walker, and I did a whole series of videos covering chapters. And so if you've watched those, you basically know everything that happens in the book. As we go on through this podcast, that will be a point of the conversation, is what the book, or I guess I should say what the movie does differently from the book. And it's very interesting. It is very interesting. But last time we really covered the plot, we talked about some of the behind the scenes aspects of the movie. I guess we should, going into this one, we should lay into a little bit of our views and interpretations of the movie. Talk about how much we enjoy this movie on its own merits.
Yes. Real quick, can we just start off the bat with, who do you think is the killer? Or more importantly, do you think there is a killer? Or, like, what do you think is going on with that?
Yeah. So it's interesting because the book is its own thing. The movie kind of leans in a couple directions because it's kind of like it really, leans in one way, but then it's also intentionally set up to be, I don't know, what about this? And also it's hard to not paint what I think happens in the movie based off of what I know happens in the book. But I guess it's just, obviously Stuart Richards is, I don't think.
Well, no. So I'm just asking, like, what do you think is going on? And if you think that there is not an answer, because that's an answer too. If you think that it's just like Friedkin didn't actually know what the hell he was doing, that's an answer.
I do think that obviously a lot of it is open-ended and ambiguous, but if you were to ask me in terms of who do I, like really point blank, who do I think the killer is? I think it's interesting, the shuffling of the killer actor and the killer in the last scene, then playing the victim in the next scene. But I don't think that is, it's actually like 4 different killers and the last one is Stuart Richards. I don't think that.
You think the fact that it has the same voice,
Stuart Richards.
You think the fact that it has the same voice is like, you think the fact that it has the same voice is like, it's actually the voice, it's actually that person.
Yeah, I think Friedkin does a lot to make the movie more interesting, but logically, I think it is Stuart Richards, and it has to be Stuart Richards who commits the first murder, because the first murder that they talk about, not the first murder you see, but the first murder that they talk about in terms is one of his professors at Columbia. And then in terms of what happens at the end, the movie has some, well, I guess they're not even subtle. They're pretty overt, but I don't think Al Pacino's character is, I think they give him just enough to suggest maybe he is, I mean, he breaks into, what are their names? Ted and his boyfriend. What's his boyfriend's name?
It's not Gary, is it? I really don't remember.
Man, I always forget.
I feel bad. Yeah, I always forget that guy. I remember Ted because he's such a big character.
Right. Let's see. But I don't think that he is necessarily the killer in that case. Let me just see real quick. Sorry. Gregory, thank you. I knew it was a G. Gregory says he intends to turn nut brown. Yep, one of the lines from the book. But I guess, I mean, it's the first time I watched it, I didn't really think, Al Pacino is the new killer. It kind of doesn't make sense for that to happen. It's more of just like, when you adapt something, like if you adapt a series and you're not going to do exactly what the source material does, but you kind of leave it open for interpretation. It feels obviously like that, but he didn't want to lean so hard.
He freaking definitely showed, like, I think to go along with what you're saying, I think freaking definitely took things that were definitive in the book and said, I'm going to make that ambiguous just because it's just more interesting. Like, it kind of doesn't matter exactly what happened. And so if you're trying to figure out exactly what happened, the book probably is a really good roadmap for that.
What do you think?
So I'm going to get all weird for a minute here. So, okay. So, first of all, I want to say real quick, I spared you a joke. I was gonna say it was his girlfriend, like the whole movie. No, but so instead, here's what I think is going. So this seems kind of crazy, but if you at one point in the movie, and I mentioned this in the previous part 1, how many parts have I been in? Have I just been in part 1 and this is part 3? Like, I don't even remember.
Part 2 is the Q&A.
Oh, okay, cool. Okay. So in the first one, I mentioned this, that at some point in the film, it's when they get into Stuart Richards' apartment, you see a Jung book, Carl Jung. And Carl Jung, of course, was a psychoanalyst, the guy who was, I guess you could call him like a philosopher almost. He had all sorts of weird, interesting ideas about collective unconscious and stuff like that. And so being a Jung fan, I'm not like an expert, but I am a fan of him. I thought that was interesting, and I thought it was somewhat notable that he chose to show that book in the film. And so, 1 second. So, I was thinking about the movie kind of from that direction, and I already thought it was really weird to begin with. How, like you say, how ambiguous, and you might even say dreamlike the movie is. So, here's the thing. I think that there are multiple killers, and I think the fact that they have the same voice kind of makes sense if you interpret it in a Jungian way. So I'm going to read a quote right now from Jung. Okay. It is the individual's task to differentiate himself from all the others and stand out on his own feet. All collective identities interfere with the fulfillment of this task. Such collective identities are crutches for the lame, shields for the timid, beds for the lazy, nurseries for the irresponsible. A lot of people have accused this movie of being about being gay. And I don't think that has anything to do with it, really. I think the point is about identity and people not being able to live with who they are in general, or not being able to have a single identity, right? I think that there are multiple killers, and here's what I think happens. The first killer is the Martian. That's the guy that we think it is, that is the actor who actually plays him. He kills the first... well, I'm not counting the professor, because we didn't see the professor death, so I have no idea how that went down. But the first kill that we see, it's the Martian. That guy kills him. Later on, I think that guy hooks up with Al Pacino. There's a scene early on when him and Al Pacino meet in the... I think it's called the Bramble. I don't know if we were calling it the Ramble before. No, I don't remember.
The Ramble. Yeah.
So I don't remember which one we were saying before. We got it wrong before, I think, but it doesn't matter. They met there.
We were saying it right.
We said it right? Okay. So they're there. It's really funny. The scene's actually, I have it on right now, and the scene's actually starting to play right now, which is a really funny coincidence. But so
when he's standing under the bridge and Joe Spinell walks by and looks back at him, and then the actor playing the killer walks up next.
Yes. So they walk off. Al Pacino and the guy playing the killer in the first scene walk off, and it just cuts, and we don't know what happened. I think they had sex, or they did something. I think that they hooked up, and that this confuses Al Pacino. Again, it's not about being gay. It's about not being able to face up to the fact that he's an individual. And so what is this archetype? What is this collective identity? It's this guy who wears this hat, and he has the sunglasses and the leather jacket. It's an ultimate form of masculine power. And it's deliberately fascistic. And which is something that's interesting about that culture in general. They were interested, and still are, in the leather daddy thing. It's like, it's interesting because it is about being this powerful dominator. So I think that Al Pacino hooks up with this guy, and I think that then the second killing is when this guy gets killed. I think Al Pacino kills him. Now, this is a pretty crazy interpretation, and probably isn't borne out entirely by facts if I were to go into all the details, but based on the fact that you never see the killer's face in the second scene, like you don't even get close enough where you see his lips, which you see in the first kill scene. I think it's possible that that's Al Pacino. I think it's possible that that's Al Pacino. And since we've already established that the voice can hop around under my ridiculous theory, then Al Pacino takes on the voice because the voice is a representation of the archetype of the collective identity that he's using as a crutch to be able to hold on. Stuart Richards is almost used by the writing as the most overt representation of something that all of the other people have as a problem. And maybe he gets it, and that's why he's reading Jung.
Right. If I can add something to
Sure,
that?
absolutely. Go ahead. Sorry, I've been rambling.
No, you're good. Ramble. Something that's really interesting also about that second scene, or that second killing scene, where the actor who played the killer is walking along that area, and he stops and starts talking to this one guy.
Yeah.
The nature of their conversation, you could interpret it that they know each other, or that they've already, he's got this smile, and he's just kind of like, "Hey, nice night," and the guy's like, "Yeah." And it kind of does.
I completely forgot about that. I'm sorry to interrupt. I completely forgot about it, and you're absolutely right. Keep going.
I was going to say, I've been in that situation where someone that you've hooked up with, where it's like you guys aren't telling other people, but you see each other and you're just kind of like, "Hey, what's up?" It's like, "Oh, nothing." It's like,
right.
"Oh, you having a good day?" "Yeah. What about you?" You're just kind of like, it's kind of like, "Hey, we know something that none of you know."
There's nothing about their interaction that says that it's the first time that they've met, for sure.
They're both a little too comfortable. I mean, you could absolutely have that kind of rapport with someone for the first time, especially if the context is sexual cruising.
Right. And
but like I said,
charisma.
You can interpret it as, "Oh no, they've actually hooked up before."
Right. Right. And like maybe the other guy, maybe the guy doesn't even know. Maybe he's not sure because they all look so friggin' similar, you know? So
Yeah. Okay. And then, not trying to jump the gun here, but
no,
then who is the killer in the Peep Show?
so I think that the killer in the Peep Show is literally just some other dude. And the reason I think this is
A
because
copycat killer.
yeah, it's just it's another guy who's having an identity crisis, and the thing to me which indicates that this is not about necessarily entirely about sexuality is that at the end of the film, his girlfriend, Al Pacino's girlfriend, tries on the hat and the sunglasses, and I think that's her trying on the persona and trying to figure out if it fits her or not. And of course, I think Al Pacino did kill Ted and also Gregory at the end of the film. And the reason you don't see Gregory and the reason they think he ran off is because he's going to dump Gregory's body in the water. And that's that's the last shot of the movie is the trawler going by in the water. They're going to find Gregory's body. So that's my general interpretation. Like, and again, it's all based on the Jung concept because otherwise it doesn't really make sense, the voice, and it also doesn't make sense, the different actors and everything. And so the only thing that makes it work to me is this interpretation. It's almost like, and this is really interesting, one of my favorite film critics, a guy named Mark Kermode, he once compared it to like a possession movie. And it's like, yeah, it is. It's a possession movie.
That's interesting.
And it's the guy who made, of course, the guy who made The Exorcist. So it's just a really interesting thing that, yes, this movie absolutely feels like a demonic possession movie. And I think I figured out the way that it makes sense is that it's this collective identity that possesses people. And, you know, I don't want to get too far into philosophy or any of that stuff, but you can understand how in the modern world, people who don't have an identity might fall back on this easily prepared archetype. And, you know, I don't want to go any more than that, but imagine a bunch of people that look like that killer, with their fist up, okay? Like, there's all sorts of crazy ideas in there.
So is then the other thing that goes with this theory is that Stuart Richards did commit the early killings that happened before the opening of the film?
I think it would make sense that he killed the professor. Yes, he definitely has killed other people. He's talking to his dad, who's dead. I mean,
right.
Yeah, he did.
And he's describing to his dad in letters about seeing like a black shape like following him.
Yes, thank you for going back to that. That shape that is following him that he describes, the detail of it is very specific, and it is in fact an image.
Is that his shadow?
No. I think he says it might start as his shadow.
Well,
I don't remember.
Not his physical shadow, but yeah, like the
his shadow self,
psychological shadow.
His shadow self.
Yes,
I think
his shadow self.
That's a really interesting interpretation. Yes, in Jung, you have the concept of the shadow self that you have to kind of incorporate into who you are, otherwise it will act out. Yes, that's very possible that's where that's coming from. But where it comes from directly is that Jung actually saw that. There's a painting of it, and we'll put that up with this episode so people can see it. But that painting appears in the book, and you see it for a moment. It appears in the book the kid's reading. So it's really interesting that the guy is like seeing the same thing he's reading about in the book. But it's a very direct link. And you could also interpret it that the kid is just crazy, so he's like copying what he saw in the book. But either way, I find that to be an interesting part of it. And I do think that Stuart Richards, is that his name? I do think that he has killed multiple people. I don't think that's imaginary. But when he says, I never killed anybody, what he means is that's someone else. And that someone else has been an identity that many people have adopted. And I'm just not that guy right now. The crazy thing about it is he's using the voice. So it's like, okay, that's a little weird. But yeah, so that's it. That is my interpretation. And, I know that that's almost certainly not what Friedkin intended, but I kind of think that it was a subconscious thing just from reading Jung, because he definitely was reading it at the time. That's why he put the book in the movie. So,
No, that's actually really interesting. And then, yeah, the third killing you see at the Peep Show, it's so funny because even if you watch this movie for the first time and you're not really keen to the switcheroos, and you really think it is like,
you can tell,
you don't notice that the first killer is the second victim. You can tell it's a different person because he's so short.
It's a totally different build.
He reminds me of the sidekick villain in A Christmas Story.
A Christmas. Oh,
do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. Fucking
the little like, all right, come over here. The little like henchman to the yellow-eyed,
he's like an elf, isn't he?
Bully.
Oh no.
Yeah, he's just short. He's like
the kids.
No, yeah, not the elf, but yeah, the kids. Like there's the one bully with the red hair, and he's got the little toady that follows him around.
Okay, it's been a while since I've seen.
I think his name is Rover Dill or Grover Dill or something like that.
Right. No, yeah, but in that scene, it is actually kind of humorous how obviously it's not the person you've seen in the previous.
He's shorter than everybody in the establishment.
I think his body shape is different too.
He walks in.
Yeah.
Its body shape is different, but yeah, he walks in and there's like maybe at least 5 people standing around, and he's visibly shorter than them all.
It's one of those things where you wonder at which points in the production was Friedkin on drugs, and like, did he just say like, the hell with it, let's make him like really short? I don't know.
So how do you like Cruising in terms of just like on its own, not trying to compare it to any other type of genre or any type of like movie from the director? Or, I mean, what's interesting is this movie came out in like mid or early 1980. And so it came out, I think, before Friday the 13th established the slasher genre is, a thing. Like, I talk about this on the channel a lot, that of course slasher films had existed, but they weren't called slashers. And that's kind of how genres come about, is it's like, yeah, a few movies over the years can do a certain thing, but it's not until one of them makes it like bankable, and then everybody goes, oh, I'm going to make one too. And then it's like, the market is saturated. That's when it really becomes an official genre. And Halloween was the first one to kind of get people to be like, oh, wow, you can actually do a movie that's totally just focused on this. It's not, like Psycho is interesting. Peeping Tom is interesting. But they're both very focused on like the psychological aspect. And, Twisted Nerve, the British film, they're very focused on the psychological aspect of what makes someone the killer. And Halloween was like one of the first ones, not the first, because you even get it with Black Christmas, but one of the first ones to really just kind of do it right, make it very accessible. Like, critics really liked it. And it just kind of showed you don't really have to go down the psychological route. But anyways, and then Friday the 13th was just like, yeah, let's just lean into this. And so in then the following years, in the early 1980s, there was this oversaturation of slasher type movies, and Cruising came in right before that.
Right. And it's interesting because it absolutely, if it came out afterwards, would feel more like a slasher, I think, to a lot of people.
I think so too. And I think that's what's incredible about it. Like we mentioned this, that the kills, specifically the first one, because that's the person you actually spend, the other kills, they cut really quickly once the violence begins.
Yes.
But that first kill is
like
the
most amount of time with
really
that person. Yeah.
like sympathetic.
Mm-hmm.
Like
you really
like you really feel bad for that guy.
Yeah, we said this before, but it's like there's real empathy in that scene that I think disproves a lot of people's assumptions about the film's perspective on homosexual life, because you see in this man's face, he was just someone who was looking for some fun, maybe some love even. You don't even know. He seems like a very sweet man. And suddenly he's afraid, and you see like this child in him of just like, I don't want to get killed right now. It's a great scene. It is so effective. And then the fact that the knife goes in and the angle and everything, it looks like real. It's so good. So yeah. Okay, so real quick, I love it. I love it. William Friedkin has become, over the years, has slowly become one of my favorite, kind of low-key favorite directors. I love Sorcerer. I saw it many years ago and thought it was amazing, and that was when it was on like this crappy, like lopped off at the sides version that they had for like VHS. And then a few years back, they finally released a Blu-ray, which is really good, and I do recommend picking it up. It is such a fantastic movie. Of course, he made The Exorcist, which is like a classic film. But this is going to shock a lot of people. I have never seen that movie, and I want to see it, but I'm serious. I want to sit down and see it, but the problem is I've always been afraid I'm just not really going to.
Are you serious?
Think it's scary. I've seen Exorcist 3, and I love it. But I need to see that movie. So, but real quick, I think this movie is so unique, so original, such a great vision. We'll never see anything like this again. It is such an experience, and it transports you into a universe that is like you're never going to see this in another movie, and it's expertly done. So that's really all I have to say about that. Yeah, that's great. Sorry, I just wanted to wrap that up.
So this is what I will recommend for you and for anybody who has not seen The Exorcist. Do not watch the edit that's called the version you've never seen.
Oh,
because it
I do know this.
It throws in all of the deleted scenes. And here's the thing. Some of the deleted scenes are really good. Like, the scene where she is the running down the stairs, the spider walk, is that? I don't know if that's in the original, but I'll just say this. The movie, if you watch the version you've never seen, is what it's called. It's a perfect example of how sometimes some scenes should be cut and some scenes should be altered or just cut out certain parts, because the pacing in that edit is way off. It's all over the place.
Right.
It's
I've heard this. I've heard that
it's not even really scary.
Well, it's
really bad.
It's also not it's not a director's cut. You see, I hate alternate cuts by the director that are not director's cuts, where it's just like, I thought I'd make it longer so that we have another version. It's like, what? I hate that. And so that's what I heard. So, but we'll get off that because I don't want the shame of that to linger too long. I do intend to see that movie. Probably I'll see it this October. But love Sorcerer. And I've come to start really liking I love Bug. For anybody who hasn't seen that film, it's fantastic with
Bug.
Michael Shannon.
Bug was crazy.
Yeah, you've seen it. I know you've seen it. It's really good. So William Friedkin is just a really intelligent guy, and I mean, look, I've got the movie on right now. I love how grungy it looks. I love that. Like, it looks like documentary footage, even though it's like really solid. Not moving, still frame. It's still it's like documentary footage, and it really makes you feel like you get to see something you would never get to see otherwise. I'm surprised the movie was never released by Blue Underground. Sorry, go ahead.
I had I guess I'd call it the privilege of, we had talked about this last time, where the movie has been called homophobic, has been, labeled all these things, and William Friedkin in numerous interviews regarding the movie has always said it was never his intention to make a comment on a group of people. He just thought this would be a very interesting setting for a murder mystery. I showed the movie during the end of Pride Month to my roommate and a bunch of his friends, and they had all just gone out to the gay bars, club hopping. And they came back. They came back a little early because it was raining out, and they were at an outside place, and they were like, "Yeah, we got rained on." And so they came back, and I had already kicked the idea, hey, if you guys ever want to watch Cruising, it would be really interesting to actually get some gay men's perspective on the movie, whether they think
they're all gay.
They're all gay, and I want to say it was 5 or 6 guys total, and it was kind of late in the night, so. Eventually, most of them left, not because they didn't like the movie, but because it was just I gotta go home. But my roommate and one of his friends stayed, and they watched it, and they both really liked it. And I asked them, I was like, "So, do you think the movie is homophobic, or because I'm interested?" And they said, "No, it actually is. For a movie that was made in 1980, I mean, obviously the timing is bad because that was right when the AIDS epidemic was kicking off." but they thought it did a really good job actually handling a lot of the subject matter. And my roommate in particular was saying, like, I could totally see this movie being remade today. And I was like, really? I don't think so. And he was like, oh, absolutely. You probably would just have to change some of the aspects, like, you know, make it a little bit more 2024. But he's like, I don't see why not.
So, like, and that makes sense. Like, I think it because I don't think that the movie itself is homophobic. And so I think that makes sense that someone, you know, who actually lives in that space probably, you know, wouldn't be too offended by it in modern times. I will offer as a slight counter, or as a, let's say, devil's advocate approach. I think that it might be different for a gay man who lived in 1980, or who living in 1980 when the movie came out. And in a sense, what's unfortunate is that those men couldn't, or that anyone at all couldn't just see the film without there being this storm of controversy
Stigma?
around it. Yeah, a stigma that you knew that the film was coming, and that you knew that it was apparently an attack on your very life. And so I think that I mean, because a lot of people who were protesting the movie might have liked it if they'd gone to see it. But the whole and it's not just the stigma of the movie, it's the fact of the life that they had to live then, and how terrible it was for gay men back then. That probably did make it a lot more like touchy subject for them at the time. And Freakin' has said, like, yeah, maybe at the time it wasn't a good time. But you know what? I'm still, you know, as unfortunate as all that is, I'm still so glad that he made it, because it captures a time that we never would have gotten otherwise. I don't think there's footage of this anywhere else. There might be some documentary I'm not aware of, but this seems like this is like among the only footage of this area. There might be some of it in Exterminator, but I think that's just mostly 42nd Street. But yeah, it's crazy. It's great. It's great stuff. Oh, by the way, this is random, but the guy that Al Pacino lets the guy tie him up, and they think that he might be the killer. Does he not look a lot like Emilio Estevez?
Emilio Estevez.
No, wait, I'm using the wrong name. Shit, what's the guy from Into the Wild? I'm so sorry. I mixed up his name.
He does. He does.
Just Hirsch or something, whatever it is. Emil Hirsch, that might be it. But you know who I'm talking about. I'm sorry, I don't know why I call him Emilio Estevez. That's the guy from Mighty Ducks, I think.
I haven't seen it, but I just looked him up, and like, yeah, he does.
Right? Okay.
Yeah. He does. Skip Lee. That's funny.
Skip Lee. And I like that character because he just seems like he's a nice young lad out to get laid. Nothing wrong with him. He's definitely not one of the killers.
Well, he's also, the reason why that he was suspected is because he is, like, the bartender even said, oh yeah, that's Skip Lee. Don't go near him. He's a dangerous guy. So I think he is lashing out in some way.
You're right. It could be like, that could be bold. Like that could just be his reputation. But you know what? You're probably right. I completely forgot that. And of course he does work at the restaurant with the steak knives, but whatever. But you're right. I guess Skip just charmed my pants off. Sorry, go ahead.
Another interesting thing when I showed them the movie was how real the kind. I mean, they said it wasn't like, you know, like you could obviously do a lot to, like, okay, the aspect of cruising in the movie, a few of them said, yeah, that's not really accurate. That's not really like how it goes. But of course, this could be the difference between 1980 and 2024. But
I honestly think it is. I hate to act like I have some kind of expertise, but I actually think that it is because of the AIDS crisis. Right.
But one thing that was, you know, kind of like, oh shit, was a few of them were mentioning, like, when you are in that situation of getting past the talking, like that was the thing they said wasn't really realistic, like the actual kind of cruising part. But like when they actually are like going to hook up, a few of them were saying like, yeah, I've been in that situation where you're like kind of afraid. One of them was saying he hooked up with a guy and he was like, just so you know, I have a gun. And he pulls the gun out and like sets it on the nightstand. And he was like,
whoa.
And the guy was like, yeah. And I'm like hooking up with this guy. And the whole time I can't take my eyes off this gun that he just set on the nightstand. And it was like, I kind of wish he didn't tell me that, but I also understand why he had to tell me he has a gun.
That sounds like that could be a scene in the movie.
right?
That's nuts. I love that. Oh wow. Yeah. Like overall, like, because I had heard about cruising for a long time, but I hadn't seen it, and I for this, I think I saw it for this for the to like oh people you've told me people have been saying like cruising might be a Giallo-ish, you could talk about it, and really I love it. Like I really like it. I bought it. I bought a copy of it just to have it, not even for the podcast. And it is such a unique film. Again, I don't think I'm ever going to see anything like this. And it there's something about it that's just so interesting. How dark it is in a way where you kind of get into what's happening and everything, and it's not at all like I don't know. Yeah, I can't. I'm definitely rambling now, but I will just say like this is probably my favorite like cop investigation movie. I can't think of a one that I like enjoy more than this because it's so interesting. But yeah,
Yeah, I'm glad that I covered it. I'm glad that I watched it for the channel because it's a movie that was not on my radar at all. Like I had to look it up and I had to be like, okay, I've never heard of this. Okay. Oh, it's the guy who did The Exorcist. Oh, it's got Al Pacino. Okay. And yeah, I was pleasantly surprised. This is a movie that I think not just for myself, but I think this movie flies under a lot of people's radar. And
I think so.
I think this movie deserves to be seen more. I mean, obviously a lot of, it's not for everybody, but I think way more people would enjoy this movie because it's like I said, it's not a slasher. It's very unique. Like you were saying, it is very unique. I can't think of another movie that is there might be another movie that kind of has a similar plot with a cop, going undercover into like, a certain realm to try and
lifestyle.
Yeah. Yeah. But the execution is totally one of a kind.
Yes.
I was going to say, I feel like if you were to see a movie that was similar to Cruising, it would be just kind of more in the extreme, like Irreversible. I kind of get similar, like, oh, that kind of reminds me, but Irreversible is just disgusting, like how messed up it is. And it's like Cruising is not like that in that degree.
Oh yeah. So yeah. So the closest thing to me, and it's very different. It's not even like close, but it's like the closest thing in terms of how the movie makes me feel is David Cronenberg's Crash, which is this really, really disturbing, weird movie about people with sexual deviancies. And but it's also kind of a queer movie, and it's hard to explain. You'd have to see it, but that's the closest thing. But that's when I say that, it's like it's not even really close. There's nothing really I can compare to this, and that's what I enjoy so much about it. And when you compare it to a Giallo, there's similarities, but I wanted to ask real quick because I think we're headed into the Giallo scores fairly soon. Was it 1 to 5? I don't remember.
Oh, the score. Oh,
the score.
Yeah,
was the score meant to be like a 1 to 5 score?
For all the different things. A score of 1 is you don't see the connection. 2 is you kind of see the connection. 3 is there's undeniable ties. 4 would be it could said to be a Giallo. It could be said that it is a Giallo hybrid film, and 5 is it might as well be considered a straight up Giallo film. Like that's Giallo through and through. Real quick though, I would like to talk about some of the similarities and the differences between the film and the book.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I have a question for you, actually.
Yeah. I would actually love questions for this.
So, in the book, is it overt, or is it just is it subtle the same way that it is in the movie, or is it more overt that the main character and Ted may have a romantic relationship?
It is stronger in the book.
Stronger, okay.
It's stronger in the book. So, I'll answer that. I'll just go right to that. So check this out. This is one of the most interesting differences of the book. So remember how John, I forgot his name, but John Forbes is what he's called. But
John Forbes is the persona that Friedkin keeps calling him. Yeah.
Yeah, but in the book, his name is John. So that way he only had to change his last name so he could still I
think it's Steve.
Steve Burns is in the movie.
That's it.
Yeah,
That's it.
I want to say it's John. Maybe it's John Burns, John Forbes. But anyways, so he gets the assignment because all of the victims share the same profile. They all are like a certain build of, male, certain height, certain age, dark hair.
Right.
He looks like them.
Which is true in the film as well.
Right. But what the book does differently, Teddy is described as looking just like them.
Okay. Yeah, because in the film, he's got like brown hair.
He's got like blonde hair.
He looks lighter.
Yeah.
Well, no. I don't remember. I just know it was lighter. But it's like he's got a totally different look.
Yeah. John meets Teddy in the same type of situation where he's throwing out stuff, and Teddy is like, "Oh yeah, don't like." The landlady tries to sell the magazines. She hasn't figured out how to sell her trash. Like, again, all the scenes with Teddy and John are almost verbatim. Like, they copied and pasted lines from the book into the script. So they go out to a cafe, and he's talking to him, more. And there's like a scene where he goes into the bathroom, and there's this like really weird, like gay guy, like in there kind of like primping himself. And John can't go to the bathroom because this guy is just kind of there. And he walks out and he's talking to Teddy about it. And Teddy's like, "Oh yeah, that guy. Yeah. He gives us gays a bad name." And they kind of start like ripping on him. And at the end of the scene, he basically has this realization that he's like, you know what? I might, what I thought about all gays, like this Teddy guy, he's all right. I actually like him. Like maybe they're not all what I thought they were. And so he kind of starts developing this, like, I actually like this guy. And
like, it sounds like at first glance, it's just like, maybe I'm not quite as, maybe I'm a little less bigoted, but then if you think about it a little more, you're like, oh yeah, you like this guy, do you?
Yeah. And then he gets a phone call from Captain Edelson, and Edelson tells him, like, I need you to pack up. We're moving all of the decoys, because there's like 10 decoys in total. He's like, we're moving all of the decoys into Columbia City, because we're pretty sure we know where we're pretty sure the killer is a student at Columbia, because we realized, like, initially the pattern was all the murders were happening on a holiday, and we started realizing the holidays are for students also. And so, and the first victim was a teacher at Columbia. And so they realized, holy crap, it's probably a student. So now we have to figure out if the student is like part of this curriculum or if they're part of this curriculum. So if a kill happens in the next week or so, we can be pretty sure that, they're in column A versus column B. Like, they're actually like not taking summer school classes or so. And so he's essentially told he's got to move out of that place and move into this other area. And he goes to say goodbye to Teddy, and Teddy's kind of upset because, he's saying, oh, I talked to Greg recently. Greg is going to be coming back. He says it's my time to work. I have to go work while it's, his time to sit on the beach turning nut brown. And they're kind of just lamenting their situation. And he's just like, yeah, like, it sucks, because I was really liking you. It was fun hanging out. And like, they're having a beer, and essentially they just kind of are like, all right, well, thanks for being my friend. Goodbye. And the way that in his mind, how John talks about Teddy, he'll always be like, oh, sweet Teddy. Oh, like wonderful Teddy. Like, he's very like affectionate towards him. And then he goes back later in the next.
Go ahead. Sorry.
I was gonna say he goes back later to talk to him. Like there's a scene where he goes out and he's in Colombia. The vibe is very different. Like he's actually in like a sports bar, and it's very different vibe from like the gay bars. And so he leaves. He runs into this cop who's just like, "What the hell are you doing here? I thought I told you like I didn't want to see you." And he's like, "What? I've never seen you before in my life." And he's like, "Oh, you're saying I'm lying?" And this is in a previous chapter, the killer was out in like the park sunbathing with his shirt off, and the cop came up and he's like, "Hey, put your shirt on. Like, you know, you're basically like signaling to people, like nobody wants to see that." And he's like, "Oh, okay."
Right.
And then he like he basically like leaves that area, and like his newspapers go all over the place. And so when this cop runs into John, he's like, "Yeah, I saw you at the park the other day. You took off and like your newspapers went all over. I had to clean up after you." And so he kind of gay bashes him, and he starts like prodding him with his nightstick, and he ends up like hitting him in the balls with his nightstick. And
my God.
And John goes off, and he's just like, "Holy crap. I think I understand why they don't like the cops. Like if this is what they deal with like on a daily basis, like I would fucking hate the cops too." And so he goes to see Teddy because Teddy's the only person he really kind of has been his friend. And that's when Greg answers the door, and you get the same dialogue where it's like, "Oh yeah, I've heard of you, the famous John." And it's the same speech. The scene is identical, except when when they call each other names and he slams the door, that's where it ends. He doesn't break in.
Right. Okay, so they add that. So in the movie, there's a point where he's talking to Ted. I think I mentioned this last time, I believe. And he says to Ted, Steve says to Ted, I wish there was something I could do to help you. I wish there was something I could do for you. And he says, you already do, or you already have. Something like that. It's like, you do. And that interaction, particularly Ted's response that you do help me, that's an interaction you have with someone that you're in a relationship with. Not necessarily like a proper dating relationship, but like you're in some kind of romantic relationship with that person. You're having sex with them or something. And is there anything, is that in the book? And if it is there any expansion on that? Or, I mean, because you're saying he calls him Sweet Teddy. I suppose that answers the question, but.
Well, there's never anything explicitly said in terms of if they did anything. But the implication is there, right? The implication that he might actually have like a real fondness for this guy is there.
Right.
And
okay.
And then another thing that's really, dude, the book is so interesting. Let me think where to go from here. So there's a scene where, because you're following the killer around, and he'll have different guys like kind of picking like trying to cruise him, and first off, the killer is like, he's a player. Like he actually has sex with a lot of girls. He has a harem of girls, and he's always bitching about them and like, "Oh, this girl has like no tits. Oh, this girl is just like talks too much. This girl's too book smart. And she just, tries to think of me as like, she just tries to talk down to me. Oh, this girl is like too obedient." And there's something, he has I don't know if it's a roommate or someone who's like a neighbor in his building. I think his name is Arthur, if I'm not mistaken, or something like that. And something happened between them, but the book never says what it is. But he mentions that this guy, his neighbor or so, who's a gay guy, he kind of blames him for taking advantage of him when he was vulnerable. And so what had happened was he had a fight with his dad. Like his dad, had high hopes for him to be like, to work in the same type of trade that he does. And he's just been like, he was studying that, and then he wasn't any good. So he went back to school, and Stuart Richards is kind of just going to school to waste time. Like, so he doesn't actually have to grow up and get a real job. And
right.
He had a girlfriend who technically she was actually married, but she was like, having an affair, and he was with this girl, and he really liked her. And she ended up breaking it off with him, like just really like out of nowhere. And so this,
well, that's how that would happen.
right. And so this girl breaking this thing off with him was sort of a catalyst. And then the relationship with his father and the disappointment, you know, his parents have been divorced for a long time. He doesn't really feel close to either of his parents. That added to it. And then he was very vulnerable, like with this neighbor. And again, you don't know what happened, but something sort of, you know, something quote unquote, you know, however else to put it, something gay must have happened between them, whether the guy rubbed his shoulders or they kissed or he, you know, they blew each other. You don't know what happened, but something happened. And this set off Stuart Richards to then start going and killing gay men, because he's in the book, they're very explicit about it. He's killing the gay side of himself, and he's acting out on holidays. Like he mentions that the school is good for him. Having assignments and studying is good for him because it keeps him distracted. But otherwise he just goes out, spends all day at the cinemas watching movies. He talks a lot about The Third Man. He really likes The Third Man. And he lists like all the movies he likes, but there's this interesting aspect in the book about all of his victims.
I got to stop on that real quick. He likes The Third Man a lot. That's interesting.
He really likes The Third Man, and he really likes he really likes Orson Welles' character, and
Harry Lime. He's a really I can see why he would like him.
Yeah, and he keeps having these connections. Like he keeps going to see the movie because, you know, this is before home video. So if you really want to like see something again, you have to go back to the movie house and watch it.
Oh yeah. It really meant that you were really into a movie if you had seen it multiple times.
And he keeps being plagued by this smile. Like all of his victims at some point had a smile as they were dying. And he's always like, what does that smile mean? And then he talks about how like Harry Lime has this smile at one point in the movie. And he's like, that damn smile, what does it mean? And there's a moment where he leaves the cinema and he's out on the street, and like some guy comes up trying to cruise him or whatever. Or actually, this is a different time. Like that time, like he ends up like killing, taking a guy back and killing him, and it's another victim. But this guy comes up and he's kind of trying to be like, hey, nice night. Have you got a smoke? And he just tells the guy like, essentially like, fuck off. Like, I don't want to talk to you. And then the next chapter you have with John, he's talking about how he's gotten really good at actually initiating conversations with potential, like suspects, like, cause he has to kind of initiate conversations like, hey, how's it going?
Suspects,
and he said, except for that guy the other day who I asked, he's like, I've gotten really good. I have this method of like asking them for a cigarette, cause that's a good way to start a conversation. And that one guy the other day told me to fuck off. And you're like, holy shit, they actually crossed paths and they didn't know it. And,
that's fun. That's really fun.
Yeah. And
I think Friedkin does want to imply that Pacino's character comes across him as well in the movie. Like, we just don't know when and where. And like, because if it's Stuart Richards, he meets him the first night.
Right. And so this is where the book gets like, the book gets really interesting. So he moves into, so John moves into Colombia. He, like they're all in there. They've put them all in a way where like they're covering the entire area. So they're, it's not like this is my territory, your territory's over there. It's like the area is like flooded. So, and also they don't know who the decoys are. So it always comes up that he's always wondering if any of the guys he's met might have been the other decoys, or if he's ever met the killer. And keep in mind.
Oh, right.
You're right. And keep in mind, he's going in without they have no shields, which are the badge. They have no guns. They're supposed to have no weapon. The only thing that Edelson gives the decoys is this middle tube that looks like a little flashlight, and it's actually a canister of mace. So that's the only thing he has to protect himself. And at one point,
And that's a way. And that's a way to identify that someone is in this group, is that they have this mace.
And so there's a time early on where John is like beginning doing his like assignment, and he's really uncomfortable, and he goes out and he buys a knife because he's just like, I'd rather have a knife and not need it than need it and not have one. And so he's moved into Colombia now. And I think this is after he has the run-in with Gregory. He sees this guy who kind of fits his MO, and he's like, this might be the killer, because the killer, you know, like Edelson said that he's pretty sure the killer looks like the victim group, and he's been killing himself. He's been killing people that look like him. And he follows this guy, and this is where we get the scene in the movie at the park. The guy is walking and stops and sits on a bench. John follows him, sits on the other bench, and then walks over to him and asks if he can bum a cigarette. They both start smoking, no talking, and then John flicks his cigarette, and then the other guy flicks his cigarette, and it goes like considerably further. So he's like, okay, this guy's got something to prove. And he then starts trying to cruise this guy, and he's being very like aggressive, kind of like how in the movie he's being very like, he's the instigator. And the guy he's talking to is like a little uncomfortable, but like he's going along with it. And I don't remember, like
standoffish
a little bit. Yeah. And I don't remember beat for beat what happens, but at a point he can tell the guy is like going for something, like he's reaching for something, and before the guy can even grab it, the knife comes out and he stabs the guy in the throat. And then like the guy falls down, bleeding out, essentially dead. And he's going to like frisk the guy, and he finds a fucking metal tube of mace on the guy. So
that's really cool.
John killed one of the decoys. And
they should have kept that. They should have kept that in the movie.
And then in the next chapter, you're getting Edelson talking in his notebook, and he's just like, well, we got him. Like, we didn't catch him, but we got him to break his MO. We got him to act out of character. We got him to do something that he hasn't done. And we know it's him because the body was sexually mutilated, just like all the other victims. So John not only killed this guy, but he then went the next step and cut the guy's penis off and like sexually, like,
to make sure that it looks like it. Otherwise, he goes to prison.
Right. So he made it look like it was Stuart Richards. And then the next chapter with Stuart Richards, he's freaking out now because he's reading in the newspaper that this killing happened. And earlier he's been having these like episodes because like he has asthma, and you know that he's beyond that. He's kind of not well, like mentally he's not well. And earlier Earlier, he had a scene where he like that his ex-girlfriend called him, and she called to tell him like, by the way, I was pregnant. I put the baby up for adoption. And he's just like, you bitch. He's just so angry at her. And he realizes that like he's repeating the same cycle of his father. Like he kind of grew up with a bad relationship with his father. His son, if this is his son, he doesn't know, is going to basically grow up not knowing his father and having a bad relationship. And so he's just like, the cycle repeats itself. And he also is like, I don't know if I want to be a father, but you could have at least given me the chance. And so he's really upset, like, cause the girl basically, she's just like, oh, fuck off. Like, you're such a fucking whiny little bitch. And he just is like freaking out. He starts like punching his bureau, and all of a sudden the neighbor is kind of like, hey, is everything okay? And he realizes, holy shit, my fists are all fucked up. Like, I don't remember punching the desk. I don't remember doing this. I think I literally blacked out. And this is a really great scene where the guy is, trying to comfort him. And like the guy, served in Vietnam. So he's kind of like been through some stuff. And then Stuart Richards is kind of like, what kind of a man am I? Like, this gay guy actually went to Vietnam, and I'm just some little pussy who's just been going to school, and I couldn't even like get the job my dad wanted me to. And so he then thinks about whatever happened between them, last year. And he starts asking the guy, like, when you look at me, what do you see? And he's like, what do you mean? And he's like, you know what I mean? Like, do I come off as gay to you? And the guy, this is an incredible like bit of dialogue. The guy's like, I am not going to answer that for you. That is for you to figure out. And if you are, there's nothing wrong with it, but I am not going to tell you that what I think, because it doesn't matter. And he says, somebody basically made that decision for me in my past, and I resent them forever for it. And he said, if you're bisexual, if you're gay, if maybe you're bi-curious, it doesn't matter. It doesn't define who you are, but like nobody else can influence that decision other than you. And
right.
So in this next chapter where he's reading about the killing, he's freaking out. He's like, holy crap, did I black out and kill somebody? Or the police trying to pretend that I killed somebody, or maybe there's a copycat killer. He then runs into, again, I think his name is Arthur. He runs into him again, and he's just really like, fuck you, man. Like, I just asked you a simple question the other day and you couldn't help me. Like, I'm going through it. And the guy's like, dude, fuck off. Like, look, if you're going through shit, I get it. But like, maybe you are gay. Maybe you should just go to a bathhouse and blow like 15 guys and figure it out. And then he's like, Stuart storms off and he's just like, that motherfucker telling me I should go to a bathhouse, but fuck him. And he ends up looking up a bathhouse, walking into a bathhouse, and he ends up going on a killing spree, and he kills like 12 people in this bathhouse. And as the way it's describing it, it's clear that he's almost like in like passenger mode. Like he's not really in control of what he's doing, right, but he's seeing everything happening. And suddenly the guy who was at the front door comes in and is like fighting him, restraining him. The guy gets the knife from him and then stabs Stuart Richards and kills him. And then it goes back to John Forbes, and Captain Edelson is like, hey, congratulations. Like, we got him. And he's like, what? What happened? And he's like, he must have broken because he went crazy and like killed a bunch of people at a bathhouse, and they somebody there apprehended him and basically killed him because he was just uncontrollable. So good job.
That's how it ends?
No. There's a little bit more, but he says, like, congratulations, you're getting a promotion. You get a couple days off, like, thank you. You were a good help, even though, you guys didn't technically like catch him. Undeniably, you guys did good work. It's a shame we lost that one guy and he's leaving behind a wife and a child. That's a shame, but I think it was all worth it in the end, because we ended up getting him. And then the last little chapter. So he basically, John is just like, wow. He goes off, or there's a little bit in the book of him looking in a mirror and like who he sees. And it's kind of like what happens in the movie, but a little different. And then the final chapter, it's the denouement from the movie. There's another killing. It was Teddy. Teddy is dead, stabbed, sexually mutilated, the whole 9 yards, except this time they actually found semen on the body, whereas all the other bodies didn't have a trace of semen. There was no gay acts actually performed. The guy always killed them before he did anything. But Teddy, there was like evidence of like either like semen in like on his stomach or like, ass or something.
This is a good thing.
Well, it's indicative that it's actually somebody different. And so Edelson is then Edelson then goes, maybe we didn't actually catch the guy. Maybe the guy who killed this Teddy guy is actually our killer who's still at large. And maybe the Stuart Richards guy who killed the people at the bathhouse, maybe he was a copycat killer who just read about the murders in the newspaper and just snapped. And so it kind of ends that like John is absolutely a killer. And like they mentioned how Greg, like they meant to interview the roommate, but he's missing. Or like he was with his friends, so they could vouch for him, but like now he's missing, I think. But Yeah. So the book, it's very heavily implied. It's not even implied. It's like, it's almost guaranteed that John Forbes becomes the killer.
Yeah, that he has his attraction to Ted sends him over the edge, and he ends up either having sex with him before or after he kills him.
Right. And that was the other thing, was that Edelson is like, technically this dead guy fits the MO of all the victim types, which is like, oh, that's good, because if he didn't, it would be like, well, he doesn't look like them. So it's, you know, so I actually think they should have made Teddy look like, you know, brown hair, shorter.
I think
it would have.
I think that's. Well, I don't think it's a story thing. I really think it's just freaking being like, I'm sick of seeing the same, you know, look over and over and over again. Can we make Teddy look different?
Right. Well, but
and also, it really, like, with the type of character that he is, to be fair, it really does fit that he would look differently the way that they're trying to use him in the movie. And it would almost, if I may, real quick, I do think it would almost lend to homophobic arguments against the film if they all looked the same.
Yeah. Well, there's other stuff too, but that's essentially some of the biggest, most interesting things that occur in the book. And like I said, the book is very, like, Edelson literally says it, that the killer must be a self-hating, closeted gay man. And I think that knowledge of that being in the book is what really pissed people off when they heard this movie was going to be made.
I think that that's true, that people, because they knew it was an adaptation of that book, and the book was considered homophobic, and I think the book probably is, and they're saying, well, you're making that? And so you can understand why people would be upset about that. And then you're going to come into our spaces where this is like, you know, a safe place that we made. You're going to come in here and film it here.
Right.
So I understand that.
All right. Well, first off, do you have any other questions for the book?
I think you pretty much answered anything that I would really want to know. The only thing is that you said he talks about the third man a lot. Does he reference the either the ant speech? Yeah, the Ferris wheel scene. Does he reference the ant speech or the cuckoo clock speech? Either of those?
I think he references the cuckoo clock speech, but he mentions the Ferris wheel scene, but he doesn't mention the ant speech. I don't think specifically.
Right. I feel like that's implied that he sees people the way that Harry Lime describes in that scene.
Right. There's very much this sort of Holden Caulfield and what's the guy's name from Confederacy of Dunces?
Oh, I don't know. I've never read that. But when you say Holden Caulfield, I completely get that.
Ignatius Riley. Yeah. Who's very, very much like Holden Caulfield, except just more of a dilettante, or, you know, like Holden Caulfield, you get, I don't know, but yeah, it's more obviously prone to violent type of that mentality. Right.
Yeah. I don't think I have any other questions except I'm trying to throw one out there because you went to the trouble of reading that. I'm trying to think of one that might be good. It sounds like the scenes. Some of the scenes are very similar, and then some of them are completely different. The fact that the book doesn't contain the leather bars. Does that like what? Does that really subtract from the interesting aspects of it? Like, how does that affect it?
No, because the book goes from you're following the killer to you're following the detective to you're following the captain's notebook, and it keeps going in that pattern.
Gotcha.
And so it always feels like the more you learn about the killer, the more you're like, I don't know, but like they keep building upon each other. You know, like you learn a little bit more about the killer, you learn more about the detective, you learn more about, and then you realize that like the detective is very similar to the killer. They both have this like strong homophobia and just this like, and the main character, the John Forbes guy, he's incredibly racist too. And you know, like
that's not surprising.
You just get this, you know, like he's always referring to Edelson as the Jew captain. You know, it's just like,
Okay.
bro. So you totally get the sense that like they're all kind of pieces of shit. The captain is not, you know, but he's also described as a very skinny guy.
They kind of make a joke about, or like kind of make reference to the fact that the captain's Jewish in the movie because he says Edelman. So
yeah, that line is in the book.
That. Right. So they kind of keep that. Paul Sorvino obviously does not look like a. Well, I mean, anyone can be Jewish. You could look like anything, but he doesn't look overtly Jewish. He looks like an Italian guy because he's Paul Sorvino. But it's fine and it fits.
Okay, so let's score the jalliness of this movie. We are going to go down the line of, so scoring it on 1 to 5, 1 being the lowest where it's like, nope, 5 being absolutely. You can ask me again to remind you of what each one kind of means, but we're going to be looking at the overall plot. We're going to be looking at the characters, in the style, both visual style and sound. And I guess if we can think of anything else, I mean, it'll be interesting, but yeah. So I guess beginning, what do you think of the plot? Score of 1 to 5. How giallo do you think the plot is?
I think that the plot is, I'm going to give it a 2 on for a giallo plot. And the reason I say that is because it could maybe be 3, but I'm going to give it a 2. And the reason I say that is because the fact that there's confusion, the fact that we don't actually have a definitive answer in the end, the fact that obviously we're following a police detective. And yes, you've said before, and it's true, that a giallo film can have, the main character can be a police detective. But I think you will agree, though, that this is very rare, and that one can argue, or that it's rarer than just having it be like a normal person. That's kind of the stereotype, is that it's a normal person, and so you can argue that it's that those movies, while being giallos, are a little less giallo because of that. That you can cut off a little bit of the score because of that. I think that that's fine. I do not consider the cop being the main character to be a giallo trope. So I will give the plot a 2. I think really the more strong giallo elements are like, maybe they are, you know what? Okay, I'm going to amend that. I'm going to give it a 3. But that's as high as it'll go because of those things that I said. There are plot elements that are giallo-ish, but I feel like it's more the feeling of the movie. But yeah, go on.
Yeah, I was thinking of going as high as a 4, which would be to consider the movie a giallo hybrid. But you're also right that it's like, you know, I don't think Friedkin was. I mean, maybe he had seen some giallo films because, you know, giallo had already been out for an entire decade.
I wouldn't be surprised if he'd seen 1 or 2, but it doesn't feel like it was a huge focus or influence, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, the highest I would go would be 4, but I would probably then go with 3 as well. Because it's like, you know, you could see this type of plot being for like just a crime movie in general, you know? It's not overtly like, oh, that's totally a giallo plot. But I'll give it 3 because
I do think that if you wanted to turn this movie into a giallo, then the main character would be, I keep forgetting the actress's name, but his girlfriend. And so it would be like, oh my God, is my boyfriend a killer or not? Would be one of the questions of the movie. And where is he going? Why does he go away all these nights? And by the way, in the end, in the giallo version, he would break into the apartment and she'd think he was going to kill her, but then he'd save her. And then he would say, I'm an undercover police detective. I've been doing all this, blah, blah, blah. And he would say it really quickly and it would clearly be dubbed. That would be how that would go down. But if you wanted to make it more giallo, you make her the main character. You have a more definitive killer. And then I would say that some of the more like, honestly, that's it. Honestly, that's kind of it. Because the movie, the psychological, and I understand why you were going to put it at a 4, because the psychological aspects of the movie are very giallo. And that's what I was going to say. Like, the plot has Giallo stuff in it, but it feels like it's more the psychology of the movie that it's just so sinister and disgusting, and the idea that anyone can be the killer, well, that's Torso, right? That's a lot of Giallos, right? That absolutely does feel Giallo. So I could even see myself agreeing with your initial thing that it's 4, but the reason I put it at 3 is just because I think those things hold it back from being in the real hybrid Giallo territory. I think, and we're going to talk about these movies much more in depth later on, but I think a film like Dressed to Kill much more fits that.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And we'll talk about that in the future. But.
Yeah, that is way more like, I mean, the kill in the elevator, that's from Case of the Bloody Iris.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying is that Brian De Palma deliberately did that. He was a fan of Giallos. I think Friedkin probably went to the theater high or whatever and saw a Giallo. I just don't think he was like, I want to make a film like Dario Argento. It just doesn't seem like him. He's the films that he was really into were like weird art films. So that's how I see it.
What would you throw as characters?
So the main character is kind of Giallo-ish because he's so like uncertain and confused about things, and so you could see that kind of fitting in a Giallo. But the problem is that Giallos tend to have much more interesting and flamboyant characters, at least the ones I like. And so that's kind of a drawback of the film. I think that I personally I would probably give it like a 1 or a 2 because I can't.
I was going to say 1 or a 2 as well.
I want to hear your arguments though. What do you think? Do you think that there's any Giallo characters in the film?
The thing, again, I don't want to sound pretentious, but kind of what you've said about spaghetti westerns is very true for Giallo, is that it's more than just plot. It's also very much the execution and the style. And
yes,
the thing is, Cruising's plot, I would say, is the most Giallo-like, but everything else is like, this is undeniably an American film.
Right, exactly.
It feels like an American film. Like the characters, even though they're in these situations that are a little Giallo-esque, it's very much an American way to do it. And so I think that
yes, absolutely.
Yeah, if I was being generous, I would say 2, but ultimately I would say 1. I don't see it at all.
I'm going to go with 1 as well, because there's just nothing. I mean, like I say, maybe Al Pacino a tiny, tiny bit because there are characters in Giallos that are kind of blank slates. But other than that, and that's reaching considerably to even say that.
Right.
So I think I'm going to go with 1.
You know, the highest regard for characters I would consider for being Giallo-like is the uncertainty of Al Pacino's character by the end of the movie. The fact that he kind of becomes, you're not sure, but darker, and like he's a little corrupted. Like I would say that's a little stronger, but even then, I couldn't even say that like including that is like, oh well, you're just copying Giallo. It's like no, it's also it's like
an unintentional overlap. Yeah, exactly. It's a crime thing.
The next one is the style. So we do visual and we do sound.
I actually think that's pretty high. So I'm going to say that visually, I'm going to say that it's a 3.5, bordering on 4.
Oh,
and sound wise, I'm going to give it a solid 3. And the reason I say those things, that's where I think it really is the most Giallo-ish. Yes, the music is not Giallo at all, but the creepy voice of the killer, because it is dubbed, has this Giallo quality to it. I feel in the scenes when he talks, and the scene when Richard Stewart Richards, whatever, was talking to his dad. The dad is clearly dubbed. That feels very Giallo-ish. The visually, I actually feel it does feel a lot like a Giallo, and particularly the one that I think of. And again, this is a Giallo that is a little less like a normal Giallo, but New York Ripper, it feels a lot like New York Ripper. I mean, when the movie starts and when the movie ends, it's very reminiscent of the New York harbor scenes in New York Ripper. They find like a hand at the beginning of the movie. It's and not in the water, but they find it like near the harbor.
Cruising came out 2 years before New York Ripper.
Yes. I'm going to say, instead of 3.5 for the visuals, I'm just going to say 3. The thing that would push it into a 4 for me, and the reason I say 3 is it's gritty. It is stylistic. There are shots that are bathed in blue, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But
it's well lit also with that.
Yes. But the thing that would make it a 4 is one of two things. Either A, you have very clear colored lighting on a scene that's unnatural, which they don't have because all of the blue shots make sense. Or B, you have a close-up on a black glove or something like that, which you don't, if I'm not mistaken, you don't really get.
No, I don't believe so.
I would go 2.5 or 3 visually, and I would go 3 audio because besides the killer, there's dubbing in the movie. There's dubbing all over the movie because, as we said, people were yelling at them trying to screw up the production. So those scenes, whenever you can tell there's dubbing, that feels like a giallo.
Mm-hmm. I will say, especially because I went through the movie on the, doing a Jolly Tally, there is some stuff, but again, it's mostly a little bit in that overlap of like things that American slasher films do that just happen to coincide with what Italian giallo films do.
Right.
I would say, like what you're saying, visual style, I would say between 2 and 3, because we don't have POV shots. We don't have crash zooms. There is like 1 or 2 slow zooms. There's one slow zoom on Edelson when he's talking to his superior, but it's not it's not a noticeable thing.
Exactly.
Giallo, the stylistic, the visual stylistic decisions bring a lot of attention to themselves. And this movie is way more subtle. It's not trying to be like, hey, look, crash zoom. Oh, whoa, the camera's spinning.
To be fair, it's subtle until it isn't. Like when the quote unquote subliminal footage comes in.
That's a good point. Yeah. The stuttering. Yeah. I'll say 3.
It's very quick cutting and it's well done, but you can tell that something was cut into it.
Right. I'll say 3 for the visual style. Like, it could be a lot stronger, but I'll say there's enough stuff that it's like, oh yeah, you don't really see that necessarily in slashers. So that is pretty giallo. And then for the sound design, I'll say 3 because the music there was 2 people. There was a composer, and then the punk music was done by the Germs. And that seems very Argento to be like, I'm going to have somebody come in and like do the music.
That's a really good point. I didn't even think about that. Because I was thinking about the music as not being giallo, but it's like, no, but I mean, Demons is not a giallo, but it's got music kind of like that at parts. And it's an Italian film, and it's got the giallo kind of heritage and like the DNA in it. And that's what that kind of feels like. Absolutely, you're right. That's a very good point.
Also, not to, I'd piss off Joe Bob Briggs if he heard me say this, but there's diegetic sound in the movie.
Oh, yeah,
and that's pretty giallo.
Yes, that's a very good point. But I give the movie solidly. I give the entire film a rating of 3, where it's like, it's almost there. It's almost that hybrid giallo. But the only issue is the things I talked about: the fact that it's a cop, the fact that there is confusion about what's actually happening, and in a sense, it almost doesn't matter who the killer is. That's not really a giallo. In giallo, it absolutely does matter.
I think the average of my scores would be a 3 as well. So that makes about sense. We're on the same page with that one.
Excellent. Yeah. Well, and it's okay for us to not be. I think we both feel similar about the movie. Yeah.
How would you rank it if this was hypothetically a giallo film? That's the last question.
If it was a giallo film, how would I rank it from like 1 to 5?
Or just, in
like
the
how
canon
good, if
of
it's a
Giallo
Giallo,
films.
if it's a Giallo movie, how good of a Giallo movie is it? Okay, yeah, I think that's what you're saying, right? How good of a Giallo movie is it if it's Giallo?
Yeah, and like what I would say is I would say it's one of the most well put
If it's a,
together. Like the
if it's
like
a
the,
Giallo,
the
it's that's one of the reasons why I don't think it is a Giallo. If it's a Giallo, it's one of the best Giallos ever made.
Yeah. It's the funny thing is I always mention this is that, look, I like this genre, but at the end of the day, I can't say that any of these Giallo films are in my top 25 films ever made. And
Right.
someone can say, oh, that means you're not a real Giallo fan. And it's like, no, I love movies. I like foreign films. I like lots of different kinds of genres in film.
Yes.
I really like
Yes.
Giallo as a genre, but if I'm being honest, there's a reason why I don't recommend this genre to 95% of people. It's
Yeah,
because I
exactly.
know they're probably not going to like it.
I was there's a wonderful expression, or I should say, phrase that Tarantino said once, and I think people really need to understand it because I've seen a lot of Italian films, and that includes Giallos, but just a lot of Italian films. He said, "You can't really appreciate cream without drinking a lot of milk, and you can't really appreciate milk without drinking a lot of spoiled milk." And that's really the truth of the matter, is that because I went on a rampage, as you did too. I mean, as you're still doing really with your channel. When I was a kid, I'll just admit it, torrented a bunch of movies, and there are a lot of Italian films, and some of them would be amazing, like trying to think, well, like Demons. I really like Demons, and or some would be terrible, like Alien 2 on Earth, which is a fake alien movie they made in Italy. So it's like there's like, that the genre in general of Giallos in particular, there's not a lot of really great movies that kind of go above or elevated above the genre. If this movie was a Giallo, it would be one of those movies.
Mm-hmm. Right. When I think of Giallo movies that are really well put together, like they're just consistently put together, it's funny because when I was ranking the top films of Giallo films of 1970, I was so conflicted to put it in number one, but I ultimately was like, I guess Bird is, number one for 1970. But I really wanted to say Hatchet for the Honeymoon. I think that movie is so unique, and I think it really is it's consistent. Like Argento, even his really good films, he has moments in his films that are just a little silly. And I don't think he has a single film that is without it. Even Cat o' Nine Tails is pretty strong, but I think it even has some moments that are a little silly. But Hatchet for the Honeymoon is probably one of the more solid entries. The Possessed also, I always rave about that movie. That movie is it knows what it is really strongly, and it's very serious. So I would say Cruising, if Cruising was definitely a Giallo, if you looked it up on Wikipedia and it said 1980 American Giallo film by William Friedkin, I would be like, well, it breaks a lot of the tropes. But if this is a Giallo movie, it's probably one you got to see. And if you really like it, you might be more interested to go down the rabbit hole.
This is not a criticism, but I was just thinking you could say that also about Kenneth Branagh's Hamlet.
I like that.
It's like, well, if it's a Giallo, it certainly breaks a lot of the tropes. But you should see it.
They don't usually quote Shakespeare, but this one does. And
no. A lot. It quotes a lot. But no, yeah. I think we've about said all that we have to say. But I thank you so much for including me in this. I've really enjoyed it, and I can't wait to keep doing stuff like this with you.
Yeah.
Because I feel like it can't really fit into what I'm doing, in terms of videos and stuff. And so talking about this with you, that's really fun, and I really like it.
Right.
I sound so stupid
saying that. No, you're good. Thank you. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. If you made it this far, you're the real ones. Nathan, go ahead if you want to plug anything right now. Now's the chance.
Don't mind if I do. No, thank you so much. I have a channel called Park Narcs. You might not be into it if you're into Giallo because it's more like Disney movies and like theme park stuff and cartoons and random stuff. But you know what? If you just like commentary on stuff, you might be interested. So Park Narcs with a Z instead of an S because I wanted it to sound stupid. So, but thank you so much for letting me plug that. And I can't wait for another episode.
Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, we have plans for more Giallo adjacent, but I think if I'm correct in saying this, we don't actually have an official lineup. If you do have any suggestions, let me know. I'll say this. The Patreon is still at a point where it's not like I have a whole lot of subscribers on here. So if you say something, if you comment something, you might be the only one, or you might be you and someone else.
He's gonna hear
I'm
it.
gonna see it. I'm gonna hear it. I'm gonna take it. And what I've been saying with the Patreon is like, I make, I don't make a lot, but I make money directly from you, and so anything you suggest is going to be heeded as long as it's actually Giallo adjacent. Don't be like, hey, can you cover Nightmare on Elm Street, or But no, if you actually give me something legitimate.
Well, actually, you could. I imagine you could request that for one of those How Giallo Is things.
You could. Yeah.
Because what's his name? John Saxon's in it.
Oh, yeah. That basically, that's all you need to know right there.
That basically makes it Giallo, right?
Yeah. He was in the Girl Who Knew Too Much.
Yeah, we were wrong. No, but yeah, he'll listen is what he's saying. He's not above it. He's not above any of that stuff. He actually wants to know what you have to say, and if you suggest something, it will probably end up being done as long as it's Giallo.
Especially like I said, especially if it's on Patreon. Like I get a handful of comments on the YouTube videos every once in a while. I get some trolls, but or people will ask me to cover a movie like, hey, can you talk about Deep Red? And it's like, yeah, but I'm going in chronological order, and unfortunately, I'm probably not going to get to Deep Red for a while.
I've got some positive comments. I haven't gotten any trolls yet, and I really would like some.
After this, you're gonna.
That's how you know you're successful.
Is when people because nobody comments unless they're
moved to comment, and so most comments in my opinion, and so far in little experience I've had being a YouTube creator, most comments are positive. Most people who want to comment want to say a positive thing. So if you've got negative commenters, that means you've actually got a good reach.
It's crazy. I know. Yeah, I know. When I first started getting trolls, I was just like, "Oh, they must be." I'm onto something with this channel. Clearly.
One of my favorite quotes. It's a little bit of a paraphrase. It might not be exactly this, but is the last line of Albert Camus' *The Stranger*. All that he needed to feel less alone was for a huge crowd of people to greet him on the day of his execution, and for them to greet him with cries of hate.
That's good.
And there's some truth to that. Like when a bunch of people hate you, you go, "Oh, I must be doing something correct." I mean, if everybody hated you, that'd be different. But
right.
But still. But you don't get I want to correct that. You don't get a bunch, because I'm making that joke, I'm making that comment. But you personally, you do get some, because I think people are like, if I was doing the video, I would say this or I would say that. And it's like, I mean, I don't want to shit on those people. And I think negativity is bad. And so look, more power to you. But I would say, make a video, if you have something to say, make a video. But anyway, get past it.
Nathan, thank you for being here. Thank you for, honestly, for having an avid interest in cruising, having a lot to say.
Thank you for inviting me.
I really admired your perspective of the theory of the killer. That was really good. It's going to give me something to think about when I rewatch Cruising. But yeah, thank you all, ladies and gentlemen. And this is Tanner Leeser for The King in Giallo. And if nothing else, I'll see you next time.